Today we are going to be having a deep dive into Uniswap v4. So, for those of you who don't know what Uniswap is, it is probably the big OG decentralized exchange on Ethereum. This is a huge exchange. It competes with some of the big centralized exchanges out there. Here to talk about it more and in depth is Will. How you going, Will?
Hey Simon, really exciting project. And Uniswap has gone through a whole bunch of different changes. Version 1, it was one of the first elements way back in 2018. And what it did back then was let you trade ETH for ERC20s. Then Volume 2 came out and that let you trade ERC20s for ERC20s. So for example, instead of just ETH for Link, you could trade Link for Shiba. And then V3 was actually pretty cool because what it did was it let you pretty much concentrate liquidity so that if you wanted to deposit your Ethereum into a pool in the previous versions, you had to deposit it and distribute it across, I suppose, the whole price range. But then with version 3, what happened was you could pretty much concentrate your liquidity at a certain price range, and that increased the efficiency of liquidity pools by up to I think 4,000 times. So that was really cool. And what we have now by Uniswap is hooks, singleton contracts, and a whole bunch of different changes in V4, and all of them super exciting. And they've got everyone like really looking forward for the release to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very exciting. And they're doing this a bit differently this time as well, in that they aren't just releasing it like they have with version 2 and version 3. They just kind of came to the market and said, hey, here it is. This time they're doing it a bit differently. They're actually, talking to the market about and getting the market involved in that. And I think that's to do with, I guess, the idea of what you can do with hooks, the idea that's, available to developers. So let's get into that a bit more then, because this is obviously very interesting for developers in the space. What is hooks and what is it used for?
Hooks are a developer term for, I suppose you could call it a listener. And so the problem with most smart contracts is that there's a lot of things that go on inside the smart contract. But then the problem is that as a developer on the outside, it's really hard to tell what's happening. So what happens with Uniswap hooks is they let you know pretty much what's going on inside a pool. And as a developer, you can listen for all kinds of changes. You know when a trade has happened, when it is about to happen, when prices have changed. So essentially, what it is, it gives you an ear into everything that's happening inside the smart contract. And then that opens up a whole bunch of possibilities in what you can do with liquidity pools.
Yeah, wow. So that sounds
For
exciting.
example, yeah.
I was going to say that sounds pretty exciting, but it's obviously what does it mean for the end user? What is people going to do? What are some examples of hooks and how it's going to help individuals like me?
Yeah. So, as a developer, if you're able to listen to what's happening on the inside, it means that you can be pretty creative in the things that you can do with the pool. In Uniswap v3 pools and pretty much every other DEX that we know of, a pool is just a pair of tokens and you trade between them, and then that's about it. But now, if you make it so that you can listen into things that are happening, you can do some really cool things. You can allow developers to build something on top of the traditional pool. For example, one thing that I really like is that it allows you to you could create something that lets you execute large orders really slowly. That's huge. Uh, if you've ever gone to an exchange and you want to make a big trade, the problem you face is that your trade is so big that it'll eat up the volume really quickly. And now in a traditional exchange that's not on a smart contract, what the option you have is that you can sort of use a bot and have the bot sell your tokens really slowly or buy really slowly. So that way you don't affect the price so much. And you can allow arbitrageurs to sort of correct the price over time rather than just fat fingering it and causing the price to go up and pretty much get an expensive trade. Now, with hooks, developers can actually build this on a DEX. And that's really amazing. If I want to make a $5,000, $10,000 trade and I don't want to shift the price up, now I theoretically should be able to do it with Uniswap V2. But that's just one example, and really the sky's the limit. You could do other things. You can create for example, limit orders that execute based on certain rules. For example, I want to buy Ethereum in exchange for my USDC if and when Ethereum hits this price, and only if I can buy at least this volume. So you can do all kinds of crazy things with hooks, and those are just some examples, Simon.
Yeah, and for me, the limit order is a really exciting one for me because that's been my biggest grudge against decentralized exchanges. I do like using limit orders. I don't do market orders when I'm on the centralized exchanges, just because I like to know the price I'm getting and the quantity I'm getting, and I'm quite happy to sit there and let the centralized exchange slowly fill that. So can't do that on decentralized exchanges. It's been a big feature that I've been really wanting, and I'm super excited that V4 of Uniswap's going to bring that to us. So I can see a lot more people being in my position and wanting to do that, going even more decentralized. I mean, I still use Uniswap quite a lot for lots of trading, but bringing fiat in, obviously, I'm not doing that. But I'm really excited. I think it's going to bring a lot more people into the decentralized exchange, just because of that. I think people want that surety of limit orders. I think that's a huge one, and I don't think that can be undersold enough of how big this is. So, what about the singleton contract? Can you tell me about that and what that's actually going to do for individuals as well?
It's one of the price saving mechanisms that Uniswap have come up with. We all know that gas fees are ridiculous in Ethereum, especially depending on the season. What the singleton contract does is it allows all of the pools to be run from one smart contract. Previously in Uniswap and pretty much any other DEX you can point at, every pool is a separate contract on its own. And then what that means is that if you have five pools, you have five contracts, that means you have five times the price. However, if you're able to code it in a smarter way, you can have one smart contract kind of running everything else. And then that obviously reduces the fees. And that's no easy task. You have to be really careful how you build it. And obviously, it took them three versions of Uniswap to realize, hey, it's actually possible, and this is how we're going to go about it. And so the singleton contract is one of the price saving mechanisms. They have another pretty cool one, which they call flash accounting. And what that is, and what a lot of people don't realize, is that when you're doing some kinds of swaps on Uniswap, when you're doing trades, let's say you're switching Link to Shiba Inu, you don't really realize that Uniswap isn't just taking your Link and convert it to Shibu. It's actually doing multiple hops to different places. It might take your Link, convert it to ETH, could move on to something else, and eventually get you Shiba, and pretty much satisfying a whole bunch of people. That's really cool. But then the problem is that there's a lot of accounting that goes behind that, and bookkeeping, and all of these things involve state changes of the blockchain. Now, with Flash accounting, it's a fancy name and there's a lot of crazy math behind it. But in a nutshell, all it does, it records the final change rather than the intermediary steps. It's kind of like, I suppose, doing the math in your head and then just writing the final answer on the paper. That way you save on the paper. And so, flash accounting and singleton contracts will end up saving a significant amount of fees, and that's amazing. Sometimes the fees are a little bit high in Uniswap, so this is really cool.
Absolutely. It's a huge thing because fees have always been the big deterrent from using Uniswap or any decentralized exchange. Layer 2 certainly helped alleviate that problem a lot, but the fees are still very high on layer 1. So reducing fees is obviously a huge way to bring more people into the space because, when you compare it to centralized exchanges, there is no gas fee, I guess. There's trading fees. So it's a big difference there. So I think that's a great way to bring more people in. And here's a kind of off the cuff question, mate, that we haven't talked about before about this, but I'm interested to get your opinion on this. Is that we know in crypto and blockchain, people can copy paste code and basically try and take that idea away. Is there a risk for this with Uniswap and version 4? Is this something that the other decentralized exchanges are probably just going to try to copy and incorporate into their own protocols?
That, but that's a good point, Simon. In that there's always that risk, and it's always a beauty in a sense, in that blockchain tends to be open source, and that means that you can yeah, you can pretty much copy and innovate. But there's a little bit of controversy in this one, and maybe it was actually a calculated move because what Uniswap did is that they pretty much released their code and made it open source. Great. However, they released it in a license. The specific name of the license escapes me. But if you go to GitHub and all of these other code repositories, you find a lot of quote unquote open source code, but then it's released under different licenses. Some licenses are completely free for all, meaning you take the code, do whatever you want with it. In this case, Uniswap's license pretty much forbids commercial use for the next 4 years. That means that yes, you can copy Uniswap's code, you can play around with it, you can even send pull requests to Uniswap, but you can't use this code commercially. If you do, they would be able to sue you. So, yeah, I mean, it's good and it's bad in that it's great that it protects Uniswap and it protects Uniswap's token holders, but then it's kind of like a kick in the teeth to people who really believe in blockchain and completely open source. So I guess it's kind of like a mixed bag. Uh, it allows developers to see how Uniswap did it. Maybe developers might be able to create their own code that does a similar thing. Regardless, it makes it really hard for a developer to just take Uniswap's code, copy it, and just run away and do something different with it.
Yeah, for
But
sure, absolutely. And I just
it
put
is what it is.
I
Yeah.
should just put a little segue in there, mate, that for anybody who wants to understand about copyright and patents and in blockchain, you should go check out my interview that we had a couple of weeks back with a patent attorney. We covered a lot of that stuff about copyrights and licensing rights and open source code. So that kind of gets covered there if you want to know more about that. So let's move on then. So let's talk about the risks. What are the risks that we're going to see with Uniswap V4?
Ooh, the risk that I mostly see is smart contract risk in that it's a new smart contract and it's almost like they've done redone the whole thing. So I'd be really tempted to trade on Uniswap, but at the same time, I'd be careful with the amounts I would use. It's new, and I can guarantee you that there's definitely people looking at that open source code thinking to themselves, how can I take advantage of this? And if a black hat has found a way, well, they're not going to tell anybody. They're just going to hope that nobody else sees it until the code is launched and then take advantage of it. So I guess that's normal. There's always smart contract risk there. What do you think, Simon?
Of course, there's always smart contract risk. And there's a thing that I like to talk about in crypto that everyone talks about crypto being trustless. And I guess that's the sense of blockchain in general. But actually, when it comes to using protocols, there is actually trust there. The reason why Uniswap is so big is that people trust it. They've been using it for a long time. They know the name, they know the brand, it's been around. So there is trust there. And the big risk that Uniswap and everyone in general, when we go to a V4, that trust is still there, but it is now a non-battle hardened smart contract code. There hasn't been years of people trying to break into it and steal the money from it. So Uniswap basically start again. It's the Lindy effect is a term that's used for technology and other things, but it's like if something has been around for a long time, that means it's going to be around for an even longer time in the future. So Uniswap has kind of beaten a lot of its other competitors out there because it's just been around for a long time. But that effect kind of starts again at zero because all that initial risk is back because all that smart contract risk is back. Yes, they're doing a lot of auditing. Yes, they're really good developers and they know what they're doing, but we just don't know if there's going to be a bug that someone can exploit, as you just talked about. So, yeah, new risk, and there's a lot of excitement about it,
Mm,
and they've got a huge amount of trust already in place here. So, I think it's going to be a success because people will want all these new features. But for me, yeah, I'm like you. Let's give it a bit of time before huge amounts of money flow into it to make sure any bugs are ironed out.
mm. Yeah, definitely. I think I'm pretty bullish on this because talking about the tokenomics, I've always been watching Uniswap one since it's the biggest exchange out there. But then two is that they have this fee switch that's been there. I'm not sure if it's from Uniswap V1, but it was there at least from version 3. And what the fee switch is, it's a switch that is embedded in the code that means that you can turn it on and essentially start pulling some of the fees that are coming from the liquidity pools and send them to Uniswap token holders. And this hasn't been switched on yet. And there was actually an update with this contract in that before the switch was only for pretty much exchange fees, swap fees, but now the fee is also can also be applied for withdrawal fees. Now the total value blocked in Uniswap is huge, $4 billion there, and you create some sort of withdrawal fee. It doesn't have to be huge; it's still significant. I wish I had invested into Binance token when that came out. So I feel pretty bullish myself for Uniswap, although I'm not sure. I don't know if the market cap is can justify it, but I still feel pretty bullish for the Uniswap token. What about you, Simon?
Yeah, I'll touch on my thoughts about the fee switch and the reasoning why they haven't done it and the reasoning why it could be bad for them. So, if you're a uni holder, yes, you want the fee switch turned on because then the uni token could be earning a yield for you. But that yield has to come from somewhere. So, it's either going to come from people who are trading in it, so people who are using it, they might get clipped more of a fee. Or it might come from the liquidity providers, and the liquidity providers might not earn as much. So either of those ways means somebody's paying. And if somebody's paying more than their competitors, guess what tends to happen? People will move to somewhere cheaper. It's just an obvious natural progression. I'm not going to pay those higher fees that Uniswap have. I'm going to move my liquidity or I'm going to move my trading to the cheaper platform. It's just human nature to try and find the cheaper bargain. That's why they've never really switched it on because I think they know very well that it could have a very big waterfall effect on the Uniswap protocol. People could just leave.
In, indeed, now that you put it that way, that makes sense because the unfortunately they or fortunately they didn't start with that fee, and so that means that the fees that they're charging have already kind of formed an equilibrium between them and the competitors in that, well, if the fees go a little bit higher, that's enough to push somebody to go to some other smart contract and trade. Because let's face it, you can trade your ETH for Link in Uniswap, but you could also trade it somewhere else. It's just that Uniswap is the go-to and it's the known one. But I have to agree with you there, Simon. If the fees get too high, then I'm moving. I'm going somewhere else. But then the flip side is that if they do turn on the fee switch, but then they keep the fees low enough that users don't notice, well, the problem there then is that the uni token holders might not earn that much. So I guess there's a balance there somewhere, and it seems that I need to think about it a little bit more to see if the let's say if the fees went up by 5%, I might not notice. 5% is a huge amount. If I'm paying, let's say, $1 for fees and I'm paying $1.05, I might not notice. It might not be enough to push me away. But then the question is that 5 cents enough for a uni token holder? And I guess that's a question that investors would need to answer.
Yeah. I know from my perspective, if it was me, I would be doing what they're currently doing, which is holding off on that switch for as long as possible. Because at the moment, people who are in DeFi, you see it everywhere that these automatic market makers, these Uniswap clones, are everywhere, and they're being every new layer two that comes up, there'll be five that'll come up, and they'll all compete for the market share and liquidity. But Uniswap tends to move in there as well. So Uniswap's quite dominant. Actually, I shouldn't say quite dominant. It's very dominant on Arbitrum. And so where Uniswap goes, because it's got the trust, it's got the brand, it's got the liquidity, the people just go towards it. It's gravity. It's gravity in effect. It's the biggest player, and it's eating everybody's lunches. So I think that they're going to still continue to do that. They're still going to play this game of beating the competition out there until the competition's just not there.
Mm.
There might be a monopoly. There might be a
Mm.
duopoly, and only then will they consider maybe it's time to turn that fee switch over.
Maybe something that they could do would be to perhaps offer lower fees if the fees are paid in Unitoken, or actually just say, hey, uh, we're keeping fees the same price, but we want you guys to pay in Unitoken. That's so in that sense, it might increase a little bit of demand for the token without necessarily, uh, I suppose, punishing the users. Uh, the only problem is that, well, it's adding complexity now for for people who need to trade. So there's another thought.
But that's just taking
Yeah.
a card out of the game that the centralized exchanges have been doing. They've all been doing that as well. They've created their own token, and if you use their token, you'll get reduced fees. So it kind of makes sense, and I believe that's probably something that Uni will do when it gets to that point. But right now, I think they're still saying we're still trying to be the lion and eat up everybody's dinner here. So that's what they're doing. Investment opportunity here. My thoughts on whether this is a good investment opportunity. I'm bullish on Uniswap for this. I think this is great. I'm more bullish, I guess, on blockchains in general because of this. And when I look at Uni as the investment, it's already a $4 billion market cap. And for my mind, I sit there and say, well, how high can it go? Like, how big can that market cap actually get? Can it 4 or 5x from here in the next bull market? It probably can. It probably can, but so can Ethereum. And so I sit there and going, well, what's my risk to reward here? Like investing in Ethereum, way less risky than investing in Uniswap. And in my mind, I'm only beginning the same similar kind of gains. So for me, I sit there going, unless I can see Uniswap doing a 10x from here, it's probably not a good investment in my mind because Ethereum's just far safer. What are your thoughts?
I have to agree with you there, Simon. I think taking into consideration the whole fee switch and the difficulty of turning it on and the 4 billion market cap that you have mentioned, I personally actually don't see a 10s coming out. It might be an interesting token, maybe just to diversify, I suppose, but I would personally wouldn't see it as a 10x investment or anything like that either.
Yeah, exactly. So
So,
unless they turn the fees on, which means you could get a yield from it, it's got very little, I guess, a value or very little reward over Ethereum because Ethereum does have a yield as well. So that's how my mind
mm,
works in it. So for me, super bullish on the project, but not bullish as an investment. Any final words on Uni
indeed.
before we sign off, mate?
uh, just yes, super bullish on Uniswap. I'm really glad that they've brought this out, and even though they have, I suppose you could say, protected their code, I'm really looking forward to see what other projects do because they do have to keep up with Uniswap. It's not an easy thing when the giant in this market comes up with a new innovation because this, let's be frank, this will pull in a lot of people. One of the things that you can do with the hooks actually is to take the LP that is not being used because the price perhaps is it's not within the price range. Take that LP, deposit it on Aave, earn interest from there, and once the price reaches the correct price for that liquidity, pull it out of Aave, put it back into Uniswap. I mean, if that happens, obviously more liquidity is going to move on there. So I mean, I'm super bullish for Uniswap, and I'm just super excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe it's a great place to put your liquidity if you're wanting to earn some yield from it. But I think that's all we've got time for, guys. So if you made it this far, please give us a like, give us a comment, subscribe, do all those things you do on the socials to help us get our word out there. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Simon. Until next time.